Conversations underway this week at the Global South Academic Forum about the future of the Global South and how important data is to that to ensure that our part of the world is not left behind the rest of the world. Kambale Musavuli is a Congolese political analyst, a digital strategy consultant and one of the panelists at the gathering. Kambale, good afternoon to you. We can see how things around data, around AI, around information more generally are changing so quickly in the rest of the world. It's kind of a revolution. Is there a risk it's a revolution that will affect us, and yet we're kind of being left out of it in a way?
The biggest risk for the African continent is how we think about what data is. Data is not an abstract object. It actually has value. And with the global AI race, data is actually at the center of what will make the best AI model out there. And the challenge for the African continent, all across the continent, we have not been able to get proper laws, a proper regulatory framework to protect Africa's data. So most of the big techs are using the African data without paying their fair share. But not only that, if we think about the other way, those AI machines are not using Africa's data properly so that we have Africa's context. So in this framework, what we hope African governments have to do is to really go back into the country and make sure if data is being accessed from your country, that there is local value added. But not only that, it's not just used for extraction as it was 100 years ago, whenever the continent was carved.
I mean, there's a wonderful phrase that data is the new oil or the new gold. And we know, of course, of particularly living in Johannesburg, how gold was taken from here, essentially. And the same thing's happening now, in a way. I mean, does the analogy hold in the way that our data is being used?
It is actually a fact. I mean, even the call that I'm having with you now is going through servers more than likely in Europe or outside of the African continent, right? But as it passes through, is there local value added? No. But the second and the biggest challenge is, as we're building our infrastructure, many African governments have not been able to invest in building their own data centers, their own fiber optic cables. We still depend on outside companies to actually control the data. And we suffer from that. I believe many Africans remember what happened in 2024 when the internet was cut off. There was a subsea cable that disconnected from South Africa all the way to West Africa. Millions of Africans, because of seismic activities in the Atlantic Ocean. So if you think about that, is how can Africans in the blink of an eye can be just disconnected from the internet? Because we do not control those cables. There is no sovereignty in the control of the technology that we use, where the data flows, and it's really a huge call for the African continent. We are at a crossroad, as we see now. Our call, as we look at the global AI race, we know that AI, the technology behind it, needs data. That data will come from the African continent, a continent with over 1 billion people producing data every day. If government are not safeguarding the data created by the people, for their own interest, we'll continue to see the usual big tech companies giving us servers, giving us cloud services, while at the local level, we don't have any control on how they are using it and for whose benefit.
So, Kambale, I hear your argument, but isn't it the same if you are someone living in Australia or Britain or maybe not France because there's a language difference, but basically any of these countries where you use English, the Americans who are training all these AI models are probably going to come and use your data. And where I'm really going with this is there really anything our governments can do? I can't think what they would do apart from cut us off, which would really put us in a worse position.
Well, globally, there is already a discussion around it. Europe has its own way of engaging in it. They have written a AI EU Act to regulate how AI is going to be used and how data is going to flow. That's their perspective. The US is doing some regulatory framework as well. For us on the African continent, what we have to think about is how do we make sure, if we know that this is ongoing, that we are taxing that? Is it possible? Yes. We can build regional data centers and also make sure that whenever we have the big tech, I'm going to mention a few names, for example, the Facebook, the Amazon of the world, if they are extracting any data from our countries and it is being monetized elsewhere, they must be taxed for the data because it's really theft, right? Imagine Africans are producing data on a daily basis. That data is actually used and monetized outside of the African continent, and they have not paid any taxes. But it's being explained as this is happening in the digital space. That's why I call it a scramble for Africa's data in one of my latest articles.
But the same thing's happening to anyone in the United States who's using data. I mean, it happens to everybody. I mean, there's no difference between what's happening to an American's data and my data.
It is true, but they have regulatory framework to actually tax these companies. We do not. On the continent, we are not able to do so. So in the US, they are paying taxes. But where they extracted the value is not where they're being taxed, right? So let's even use the analogies to kind of simplify it much more. During colonialism, the minerals that were taken from the African continent, a penny on the dollar, literally almost for free, was, when it got to Europe or the places, taxed for the companies who were there. But on the African continent, no one had any value. So this is the global discussion we are trying to have, even at the global academic forum, the Global South Academic Forum, about how, at the level where the data is being extracted, and if you are extracting the data with a particular value that you actually also putting into the stock market, using the reference of, for example, Twitter. No, when Twitter was sold to Elon Musk, there was a value put on the value of the company, which was the user's data, but no user ever benefited from the sale, right? So those contradictions are being discussed, and it's being brought up in the 21st century in saying that we must look at data as a value. And my last point will be, today, as we are discussing it, what was very interesting to me was to find out that in China considers data as a resource. And they have actually codified that in their law, that data is a resource. African countries are not codifying data as a resource. They're not looking at it as a national security matter. They're not looking at it as something we value. So when we change that, it can actually help in regulations.
Kambale, thank you very much indeed. Kambale Musavuli is a Congolese political analyst and a digital strategy consultant.